All right, so let's configure our application to be secured using Passport. All right, so first of all, we'll need to install the Passport library, and I don't believe we have that just yet. Let's look at our package.json, and I don't believe we have Passport installed. Okay, we don't have Passport, so let's install Passport. Let's say terminal. npm install Passport. There we go. Don't forget the -- save. Right? And we're going to first configure this to protect it using our local database. Right? Meaning we are going to be the repositories of the usernames and passwords of folks that want to register with our application. Yes. So let's install the Passport local. There we are. So notice that it has installed these two new dependencies. Right, make sure that those dependencies are there. Okay, now that we have done that, we need to configure Passport and say, hey, Passport, I've already configured a session for you. Right? As what Passport does is that it builds on top of the Express session library. So first we have cookies. The session library is built on top of the cookie library, and then we have Passport that uses session management, uses the Express session library. So we'll need to initialize Passport and then tell it that there is already a session library already configured. Right, so the session library, when you configure the session for Passport, it needs to be done after the fact, after you initialize the session. Okay, so first you initialize the session, and then you tell Passport to use the session. Make sense? In that order, right? I know there's going to be lots of questions on CATSA as why is it not working, and I'll be answering. Did you make sure you put it in the right order? All right. So first do the normal session, and then Passport session. All right, there we go. So we have the cookies, we have the session. This secret is used to whatever you can put any string in there. It's used to encrypt your cookies when they go out to the client. It could be any string, as long as that string, it's always the same string. And typically you would not put it here as part of the source code. Typically you would put it in a environment variable. Okay, env session secret or something. Okay, but I am lazy today, and I'm going to put whatever. But you're not. Okay, make sure that you put it in a session variable. Right? Don't hard code it in the source code. All right, because this source code is going to be on GitHub. GitHub, anybody can read your source code. All right. All right. So we have that. So now what we're going to do is that we're going to modify our implementation of login. What we want to be able to do is to somehow have Passport participate in the action of logging in. Right? Somehow we want Passport to know about us as we log in, right? And have it remember that it's us. Again, we have logged in. It's going to remember our identity. We no longer want to have the client remember us through a profile ID like this. Okay, we don't want to do that anymore. Instead, we want to have the server maintain our session information. Make sense? We don't want to reveal any information as part of the URL. Right? It's typically bad practice to have any session information made publicly available like this. Only on the page, perhaps. Okay, so we're going to change the mechanism that we log in. So first of all, one of the problems with the way we log in, one of the problems of how we're logging in right now is that in the network, if I clear this and I do this po and I do this login, notice what's happening in the URL. See that? This URL, we're using a get, and notice that we are encoding the username and password right on the URL. Yes? Okay? So that's a problem. This URL is publicly available. Anybody who's listening between our browser and our application can see this clearly, what your username and password is. Right? So somebody could be snooping right in between. So first of all, we want to modify this so that it's not a get, first of all. Right? Instead, what we're going to do is that we're going to make it a post so that it's not part of the URL. Instead, it's going to be encoded in the body. Right? Notice that it's being encoded as a query string instead of the body. So we're going to remove it from the URL. So that's easy. We can go to the service, the assignment and service, and the user service, and we're going to change it to be a let's see, where is it? Find user by username and password. I think it's this one, right? Well, first of all, I think a better name for this would be login. Don't you think? Right? A better name for this would be login. So let's change that, login. Right? And change it here. Okay. And instead of being a get, right, we're going to change it for this to be a post. Right? And that post is going to pass along an object, username, and password. Okay, and instead of using this query right here. Okay, right. Obviously, we need to change also the server, right? So if we go back to the server, on the server side, we have the service side for the user. In the user, we have this over here, right? We have the find user, and the find user is retrieving the username and password from where? Is retrieving it from the query, but it's no longer in the query, right? Instead, it's in the body. In the body, we have request.body, and we know that in the body we are going to have body.username and body.password. All right, so if we restart the server, oops, password is not password. Oh, we didn't require password here. We forgot to do that. Let me add that. Require password. Restart the server. Okay. All right, so now if I go back and log out, if I refresh and I clear this and I do po and po, I do login, notice that it still works, right? But with the difference that notice that it's not, the username and password is no longer part of the query, instead is encoded in the body, right? So it's a little better. It's a little better, but not that much better. Notice that the username and password is still in its clear text, right? So anybody who's listening in between, they could still look at the body, right? And parse the body and see what the content is there. So the next step would be to change this to use encryption, right? When we're using get, the get query, it does not get encrypted, right? So it would always go through the request unencrypted. But now that it's in the body, at least we could encrypt the body, right? Instead of using just plain old HTTP, right? This is HTTP, right? Right? We could instead use HTTPS. Now, currently we can't do that because we would need to set up the server to support HTTPS, right? We don't have that. The server is not configured to be HTTPS, but Heroku can, right? Heroku can be configured to use HTTPS, right? So that means that you can change all the queries that for you are sensitive information, such as login, registration, and things like that. Those can be protected by replacing all your queries from HTTP, converting them into HTTPS. Right? And now the body that goes back and forth between the client and the server would be encrypted. Right? That JSON object that we see there, when it goes across the wire, it would be some gibberish that even if somebody intercepts the data, they couldn't figure out what it would be. Right? Only on the other side, on the server, they would be able to unencrypt it and get the original username and password. Make sense? The thing is that in Heroku, it's not free. HTTPS is not free. It's not part of the free plan. If you want HTTPS, you need to pay. So I'm not going to make it a requirement for you to encrypt the content. Right? If you want to play around with it, go ahead and upgrade your account. But I'm not going to make it a requirement. But certainly you can play around with it if you want. So I'm not going to use HTTPS. Locally, I cannot use HTTPS. I'll just use regular HTTP. But normally, this would go on using HTTPS, and that data would go encrypted between client and server. Everybody okay? All right. All right, great. So we did that. We changed it to a post. So it's a little better. And what we want to be able to do is have Passport participate in this, right? So let's refactor our code in such a way where Passport indeed can participate. So how do we do that? So to have Passport play a role here, all right, what we're going to do is, well, first we're gonna refactor our queries a little bit. We're going to refactor and instead of we're gonna have the client when they're logging in. When they're logging in, we're going to have a dedicated login query, right? Instead of having find user, right, that behaves one way or another depending on whether you are registering or you're doing whatever, right? We're gonna split those two actions into separate calls, right? So here we're going to create a brand new one here called wait a minute. Did we change this to post? I thought we did. We'll have a dedicated post and then a login, and this will be login. Right, so the code that we used to have here for retrieving this, we're going to have a dedicated function login, right, with a request and response that does all this work, right? Okay, and finds the user by credentials. So there we go. So we have a dedicated login that only does that, only checks username and password. Okay, so the client points to login. The server is now listening for an incoming post login, and is being implemented by this login mechanism. Yes? All right. Let's try. Yes. Where? This one? Oh, thank you. RES. Thank you. Yes. So let's see if this still works. Let's log out. Okay, that still works. Let's see this user. Now it's a post, right? And it's coming back with the user object. Very good. Okay, so what we're going to do here, we're going to delegate the work of actually logging us in, right? We're going to delegate that to Passport, right? So that Passport is going to do this work. Well, not really. We're going to do it, but we're going to have Passport participate in this communication, right? So that Passport can remember us, right? That we have already logged in. Okay. So how do we do that? So to do that, we're going to do the following. I think I've written it here pretty well. Right. We're going to first in our user service, we're going to load the Passport library. There it is. Okay, we have the Passport library. And then what we're going to do is that we're going to ask Passport to intercept our login request. Right? Meaning, I don't want to handle login. I want Passport to handle this. Right, so in our login right here, let's move this over here so we have see what we're doing. Right, we're going to say Passport, hey Passport, intercept the incoming login using the local strategy. Okay? Meaning, I want you to take the username and password, right, that is presumably coming in from the request, and I want you to authenticate the person using the local strategy, meaning the local database. Right? So to do that, we're going to instantiate. Okay, we're going to need to configure the local strategy. We're going to load the local strategy. There it is. This is the Passport local strategy that we installed earlier. Right? We grab an instance of the strategy. And we have a local variable that stores an instance to the strategy. There's an object that can be configured, so we can tell it how to do this. How does Passport actually go about logging us in? Right? We're going to use that local strategy. So to do that, we use the local strategy. We tell Passport, hey Passport, use the local strategy that we just created and use the following function. Use the following function to implement the strategy. Okay? So we're going to have a function. Let me see, where's our login function? Let me bring the login function way up here so that we can follow along. Bring it way up here. There's our login function. Okay. So what's going to happen here is that Passport is going to intercept our request to log in, and we have configured this local string. This local string refers to the local strategy, and it's going to be configured in a function that we called it here, local strategy. You can call it whatever you want. But it's a function that is going to take certain queries, certain parameters. One of the parameters to that function is the username and password. That username and password we put in the body, they're going to be parsed out from the request, from the body. It's going to be parsed out. It's going to pass it to us right here. And here is where we actually do the validation whether this user actually exists. How do we do that? We use exactly the same query, the user model. We take the user model, we find the user by credentials, using the username and password that the local strategy is going to parse from the query, and we just use the same mechanism we have been using so far. But now we need to notify Passport whether this was successful or not, so that Passport can make a check and say, oh, yeah, that username and password, I'm going to put it in the cookie, and I'll make a note that this person is a valid user. So that next time around, if they navigate to other pages, right, and those are protected pages, I'll know that they have already successfully authenticated. I'm not going to ask them to log in again. Okay? Right? So we're going to tell Passport, hey, Passport, thumbs up. Yes, this person has been successful. And we have to determine that right here. We have to determine whether this is successful or not. Okay, so this is find user by credentials. This is using the user model. And so how do we do that? The data model, let's see, I forget what it does. What's it do? Okay, so it just finds one username and password. Okay, so this either returns null, right? Either returns null or an actual object. Okay, so the logic will be, if there is a user, we're gonna tell Passport that yep, this user is good. If not, right, then we need to tell Passport that this user is no good. Right, so how do we do that? We're going to do the following. We're going to replace this with this call right here. Right, we're going to check if the user is good. If the user is good, what we're going to do is that we're going to call a function that is going to be provided by Passport to tell it that the user is good or that the user is no good. If the user is no good, meaning it's null, zero, false, or empty object, or something that's falsy, we're going to notify Passport with a function that Passport is going to pass us. Passport is going to pass us a function. You can give it any name you want. Done is a very common name. We're going to call that function. If the user is no good, we're going to return a false as a second argument, meaning no good, the user is no good. If instead the user is good, we're going to pass back to Passport. We're going to pass the user object. Right? We're going to pass it, and what Passport is going to do is going to put that user object in the current session, so that next time around, if you navigate around and to other pages, Passport is going to check to see, is there a user in the session? If there's a user in the session, the Passport is going to say, go ahead, you can go. If the user in the session, if the cookie has timed out, if 30 minutes have passed by, and the session ID is no longer valid, is going to say, no, that cookie is no good. Is going to ask you to log in again. Okay. So this done is the way. This is how we integrate with Passport and tell it that it was good or no good. Right? If we return a valid user, what's going to happen is that Passport is going to let us continue where we were going. Where were we going? We were going to the login function. Yes? But by the time we get to the login function, already Passport knows whether we are valid or not valid. Okay? If we make it all the way to the login function, that means that we have successfully logged in. Right? If Passport did not find us in the database here, and we return a false, Passport is going to abort the request and is going to immediately respond an unauthorized access error back to the server, to the client. Right? So the client is going to receive a, I don't know, is it 503 or I forget what it is. It's going to receive an unauthorized error, right? And the client should handle this error by saying, sorry, username and password no good, try again, or something or other. Okay? If there was an error, because there was a database error, then what we do is that we also notify Passport that there was some kind of error. So this first argument to the done function, the first argument here where we are returning null, that allows us to pass some kind of error message. Okay? Here, there was no error. We are certain that this user does not exist. It's not an error. The user is no good. And here, we are certain that the user does exist. There was no error. Okay? And we are letting them through. Here, the first argument, we're passing immediately what the error was. Maybe the database was timed out, or there was a connection error with the database. So we're not certain whether this user exists or not. Right? We just weren't able to verify. Yes? So we could handle different errors in different ways in the client and say, try again later, the resources are unavailable or whatnot. So by the time we get to the login function here, the user has been already authenticated. Right? We have been successfully authenticated. And what Passport does is that it adds the currently logged in user. The currently logged in user will be available in the request. Right? Because this request is still a live request. Right? It left the browser, it hit Passport, and now it's hitting us, the login. So it's still a valid request. It's a live request. We had not yet responded back to the browser. Right? The browser is still pending, right? The request is still pending, waiting for a response. Right? So we're still here in the login function. We have not yet responded. We could just respond back with the login. In the login, we could just respond. And say we can retrieve the user. The currently logged in user was added by Passport in the request, so that anybody who has a request can always check to see, is there anybody logged in? Right? It will always be in the request. Yes? So anywhere in your services, you can always retrieve the current user in the request.user, and that's what we do. We're just we're sending back the user object. That make sense? Yes.
In the local strategy, how is getting the username and password?
So it expects the what comes from the client. You know, it expects it to have this format. It expects it to be in the body, and expects two attributes there: username and password. All other attributes are ignored by Passport. Right? It's expecting those two, right? With those exact names, username and password. It's very common. Most security libraries are similar, right? The specs will tell you how you need to call them and how you need to format it. Okay. All right. So we did that. One last part that we need to handle is configuring what is it that we want to put in the cookie, right? Right now, we have left it to the session library, right? We saw that it added that random session ID to the cookie, right? We saw earlier. We need to go a little farther than that. We need to put some information, any information, in the cookie that we know uniquely identifies the user, something that can be used to reconstitute the user, right? We only really need the ID of the user, the underscore ID of the user. That's all we really need, right? We can always use that ID to reconstitute and find that user from the database, yes? Right? So what Passport allows us to do is that it provides the capability of configuring two callback functions to allow us to decide what do we want to put in the cookie, right? It calls us, say, hey, I'm about to send back the cookie to the client. Do you have one last word here? What do you want to put in the cookie? And vice versa. When the cookie comes back from the client and it gets unencrypted by the server, it gives back the cookie to you in a JSON format and says, what in this cookie should I use to validate that this is a valid user? So what we're going to do is that we're going to configure a Passport, and we're going to tell it. We're going to tell it using. We're going to configure two functions. One is a serialize function, and another one is a deserialize function. The serialize function is going to allow us to tell Passport, hey, use the user object to encode it in the cookie. Right? We only really need the ID, but we're going to put the entire user object. It doesn't really matter because it's going to be encrypted, right? And the cookie is going to be encrypted, even if it has username and passwords or anything that we put in there. It's going to be gibberish on the session ID. And we're going to deserialize it. We're going to extract the ID of the user and reconstitute it as a JSON object. So let's encode that, and let's put it way down here. There it is. So here the serialize passes us the user object. We're going to decide to put the entire user object in the cookie. We can decide that we only want really the ID, right? We don't really need everything. We don't need the username. We don't need the password. We don't need any of that, right? But we're going to add the entire user object. And vice versa, when it comes back from the client, it's going to parse it, and we're going to extract some information from that object that gets parsed from the body, and we're going to extract the ID, and it's going to validate it that this is indeed still a valid user from the database. Now, do we have this in the database? I forget. Not here. In the server. Do we have find user by ID? Yes. And do we have find by credentials? Do we have this? We do, right? Yeah. Okay. Oops. All right. All right. I think that's it. Let's restart the server. Restart the server. Okay. And now let's try to go ahead and log out first. Log out. Let's refresh. and po and log in. Okay, still works just the same way, right? We have not gained anything. Actually, we have. Actually, we have. Notice that now because the server remembers that I have logged in, right? The server knows who it is, who I am, at least for the next 30 minutes, right? Notice that now this ID here that I am passing, it's actually redundant. Right? There's no need for me to pass this anymore to the server, right? Because the server now remembers me at least for the next 30 minutes, right? It'll remember that I'm still logged in. The user object is now storing the session, right? So the next step would be to replace this in such a way that I no longer need to pass the ID to the server, okay? And we'll do that next.